All right, I'm back. It's Saturday afternoon, making another lesson today, and I actually made one yesterday too. So I'm testing out. I've been using this new app. It's called it's the Black Magic camera app. It's for my phone. Yesterday I said I use it for my camera, but it's actually I'm still making videos just with my phone. I am hoping at some point that I can upgrade to a better situation. So today, though, I'm going to try and tackle a pretty big subject. I'm going to talk about musical intervals. It's one of the things that it seems is the most confusing when people come in here for lessons. A lot of times, people do not understand the musical intervals. And because of that, they don't really, it's like, it would be like if you were trying to do some kind of home repair or construction work, but you didn't know the names of your tools. Or maybe if you were helping somebody work on the car. And, I mean, pretty much I think everybody knows what a hammer is, a saw, screwdriver, wrench. But imagine if those words, if you didn't have any idea what those words meant. Well, that's what I experience a lot whenever I'm talking to people in here in lessons. A lot of times people talk about, there's this blues box that this guy uses. Albert King and B.B. King, they use blues boxes. A lot of other people do too. But a lot of times it seems sort of mystical, like there's some magic involved. If you understand a little bit about music theory, you really can break down that mystical approach, and you can really figure out in a meaningful way. Most of the really great blues players, if we really look at what they do, it's very straightforward. If we're playing blues in A, most of the players, they're going to play phrases, and they usually are moving to this A. Now, I always joke about this. I know I'm not talking about music theory yet, but I always joke that it's like if you went to see a comedian, you don't want the comedian to just walk out on stage and just say the punchline. That the comedian has to do a little setup to the punchline. Well, that's normally the way that blues licks work too. So you might have, let's see. You might have something like that. Like it does have the A, but I'm moving to this. That's A. So I don't have my backing track, but imagine you have this. And so what'll happen, this would start not on beat one. Beat one's the most important note. And what's going to happen on beat one? A. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2. Now, ready? I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's talk a little bit about music theory. So whenever we are counting the intervals, and what is an interval? The interval is a distance between 2 points. So an interval could be, if I ask how far you live from here, and I know I've talked about this in a couple other videos, it's just such a big subject. And I talk to people all the time in class, and they find it very confusing. And I'm going to try to explain why. Because I know why. I know why it's very confusing. So, but if we were talking about intervals and I said, how far do you live from here? If you answered the question, if you said, I live a 20-minute drive, hour walk, 7 miles, however you wanted to express that, 20,000 footsteps. I don't know if that's the right number. But however you're expressing that distance, that's called an interval. And it's the distance between 2 points. So in music, we have a series of intervals, and this is the thing that people find really confusing. And I know exactly why it's confusing, is that the words are used in multiple ways, and the system is very archaic, and it's been adapted throughout time. So the first thing we need to talk about before we do anything else with intervals is that we need to talk about the fact that this whole system, it was created by the Greeks. Now, I'm not sure exactly which Greek, but I've seen it accredited to Pythagoras, the Greek mathematician. So I'm going to go with that. We're going to say Pythagoras invented this system. So Pythagoras was passionate about music, and he calculated a series of ratios measuring the distances between the notes. And Pythagoras was very smart, but he used this instrument, and it was called a lyra chord, and it sort of looks something like an auto harp, except it would have a series of strings, and all the strings would be tuned the same, and then it had a piece of wood. It was like a bridge on each string, and you could move that piece of wood and it would make the string longer or shorter. If the string got longer, it would get a lower sound. If it gets shorter, it would get a higher pitch sound. Just like when we're playing guitar, if this string, if I pluck this string, it vibrates from the bridge saddle to the nut. This is the thickest string on the guitar, and this is at its full length. This is the lowest note. Whenever I press the string, if I press here at the 5th fret, the string presses down against the fret and it shortens the string. And so this shorter string has a higher pitch. So he did the calculations using the lyra chord, and from that he came up with what we think of as our standard musical intervals. Now, whenever Pythagoras did the math, he actually came up with a 12 different notes in the octave. And we have that. Here's my chart. I made this chart. I'll pop it up on the screen too. So if you notice, just like a clock, I have 12 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if I count 12, I start on A, I go all the way around, I come back to A. So this is what we call an octave. So if I was to play, and I'll put the chart up on the screen, if I was to play the A string, and then I played the 1st fret, that would be A sharp or B flat, B, C. I'm just going one. Each block on my chart is 1 fret. C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G flat, G, G sharp, A flat. Now I'm back to A. This is an octave higher. If we had an oscilloscope, I don't have one here, we could measure the pitch and find that this is exactly double of where we started. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and we need to go way back. We need to go back to 935 BC. That's when Pythagoras lived. So even though Pythagoras recognized that there were 12 blocks, 12 frets, whenever he experimented with playing the notes, he found that 5 created an unpleasant sound. He did not like how they sounded. So what he did was he named 7 of the notes. And the 7 notes that he named are the notes, these notes. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. These are the 7 notes that Pythagoras named, and we call these the natural notes. If you would have lived in the Greek era when Pythagoras was alive, these were the only notes that you could play. They created keyboards. Their keyboards were not like our keyboards, necessarily like a piano. It was mechanical. You would press the key, and there was a string, and it kind of had a pick taped to the end of the key. And whenever you would press the string, it would press the key. It would pluck that string, and that's how those original keyboards worked. But the thing that, if you've ever played piano, if you've ever sat at a piano and played it, you'll notice that the white keys on the piano, they're A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. The white keys. The black keys, those are the sharp and flat keys. And this is where it starts to get really crazy, because during Pythagoras' life, they only had the white keys, and Pythagoras lived 900 BC. Actually, I'm not sure about that. It might have been 600 BC, but I can look that up. But I do know this. It wasn't until the Renaissance period that composers really started to use the sharps and flats. That's whenever they started to incorporate them. Had you had lived during Pythagoras' lifetime, you would not have known about the sharps and flats. The only notes you could play would be A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And I have a chart, and here it is. And on my chart, I'll put this up on the screen also. I put on my chart that with these natural notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, that B and C and E and F, those are half steps. Those are closer together. So if we were playing on guitar and I was going to play A, which is open, B, second fret, C is third fret. You notice it? These two frets are right next to each other. A, B, C. Then it's D, which is a whole step, which is 2 frets. E, which is a whole step. F is a whole step. G, which is a whole step. And then A. This would be the A minor scale. They actually probably started on C. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you want to start understanding music theory and improving your understanding of music theory, the first thing that you need to do is you need to memorize the idea that the notes, the letters that are used to name the sounds in music are the letters A through G. So it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it starts back over on A. And so the first thing you memorize, letters A through G. The second thing you memorize is that the letters E and F and B and C, those are natural half steps. So E and F, if you'll notice, if I come here and I go E to F, those frets are right next to each other. E is fret 7 on string 5, and F is fret 8 on string 5. B on string 5 is fret 2, and C is fret 3. It's this way on the guitar. Everywhere where E and F and B and C occur, they're always frets right next to each other. Every other letter except E and F and B and C is a whole step apart. So now we're going to start talking a little bit about what happened and what made music so confusing. So if we lived during Pythagoras' time, they started to have a system to count the intervals. And the way that they counted them is they counted the letters that are in the intervals, the number of letters. So let's say I was playing a song and I was starting on A and I was playing C, A to C. So this is what they would do. I have some letters. They would count the letters from A to C. So if I count the letters A, B, and C, here's A, B, and C, that's 3 letters. They would call that some type of a third. Well, they wouldn't call it some type of a third. They would just call it a third, just a third. A to C is a third. So if you'll notice that A to C, this is fret 8, this is fret 5, this is A to C, is 3 half steps. So one of the things that's very confusing is that whenever we look at intervals and interval names, there's 2 components. The first part is a number. And so the number counts how many letters. It literally is counting the letters. The second part of the interval is called the qualifier. The qualifier can be minor, perfect, or major. It could also be diminished or augmented. Most of the time when you're playing music, you're really only going to see minor and major and perfect. So the thing that's important to know about this is that just counting the interval numbers started during the Greek era around 900 BC, and it went all the way until the 1500s. They didn't use sharps or flats. They didn't, they only counted the letters. So if I was to play C to E, do you see this? This is, I should do it on this string. So if I play A to C, I'm playing the 5th fret to the 8th fret. If I take 8 and I subtract 5, that's 3. So this interval it's a third, but it's 3 half steps. If I play C to E, this is fret 8 and this is fret 12. If I take 12 and I subtract 8, it's 4 half steps. So, but look at what's going to happen here. If I take C, D, and E, it's still just 3 letters. C, D, and E is 3 letters. A, B, and C is 3 letters. Why is it that one is a shorter interval distance than the others? Well, the shorter one happens to fall where B and C are, and that's a half step. So that, but remember, during Pythagoras' time, they only counted the letters. So if I was going to play A to E, and I don't have quite enough hands, but I'm going to try it. So if I was playing A to E, A to E would be 5 letters. And I remember whenever I learned about this, I always make up little stories to help me to remember stuff. And I thought it would be like if I was going running with some friends, we would count everyone going running. So 5 people are going running. That's the 5 people are A, B, C, D, and E. These are the 5 people that are going running. A, B, C, D, and E. Now, whenever they actually go running, and they go out the front door and they start running, that's where we actually count the distance traveled. And I have a student that comes on Wednesdays. He has a PhD in mathematics. He works at General Electric as an aerospace engineer. And he was telling me that during the Greek era, they didn't use 0. It hadn't been invented yet. 0 had not been invented. So, so what they would do, and so that makes sense. That's the reason why whenever we're counting the intervals, that we just count, just like people running, we count 1 for every letter. Well, later in the 1500s, whenever they started to add what we call the qualifier, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, they would actually count the distance traveled, because in the 1500s, 0 had already been invented. So this is what happened is that, so we first had, during Pythagoras' time, what we called the fifths. And so the 5th, I just did one. It was A to E. A to E, and I'm going to count. This is probably a little bit easier. I can probably show it on this. So if I count, I'm only counting the letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A to E is 5 letters. So if I play that, A, E, you might recognize this as what we now call a power chord. And so here, look at the next one. If I start on B and I count 5 letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to be B to F. Now when I play this, listen to this. Well, B to F is pretty dissonant. B to F actually is what we call diminished fifth. It's just a coincidence, but it's just how the half steps happen to fall. During Pythagoras' time, they called that interval the perfect fifth, the diminished fifth. They called it the Diablo in Musica, which was the devil in music. And they believed if you were playing a lot of songs with those intervals, that you were trying to summon the devil. And based on music history books that I've read, they actually would get people out in the center of town and they would stone them. I don't know much about stoning. I don't know if in stoning them, if they just stone them enough to hurt them so they don't play the wrong intervals anymore, or if they like stone them until they're dead. So, but I know this: people didn't want to be stoned. So during Pythagoras' era, people avoided playing the diminished interval. So if we go through and we look at the various intervals of fifths that we have C to G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, C to G is back to our power chord. It's not the devil's interval. The next one, D, E, F, G, A. D to A. That's our common power chord, not the devil's interval. E, E, F, G, A, B. That one's 5 letters. Not the devil's interval. F, F, G, A, B, C. That's the 5th. Not the devil's interval. G, G, A, B, C, D. G, and here's D. Regular, that's a regular power chord. It is not the devil's interval. Then we're going back to A, B, C, D, E. So of all the intervals, all the fifth intervals in the natural notes, it's only B gives us the devil's interval. So think about this. We're living during Pythagoras' time. Whenever we count our intervals, we just use the numbers. We've never heard of major, minor, perfect, augmented. I always joke about this, but I've thought about it a lot. And this is my joke. It's like if we were talking about where outside of my office you would be allowed to park a flying car. Well, there aren't any flying cars. And since we don't have any flying cars, we don't really know what the rules are going to be for flying cars. I mean, could you park it on the roof? Would you just sit it down in the parking lot? I mean, that, we don't know. We haven't talked about that a lot. We don't think about it a lot, and it's because they don't exist yet. Well, during Pythagoras' time, that's the same way that sharps and flats were. They didn't have sharps and flats, and so they didn't really think about those. And you'll notice here, I have this chart. This only has I don't have a sharp, and sorry about that. Oh yeah, I do. Here's a sharp symbol. It looks like a number sign. Here's a flat symbol. It looks kind of like a lowercase b. And this is a natural note. It resets a sharp or a flat. So in our modern music system, if we add a sharp symbol, we can add a sharp to any letter, and it'll raise it 1 fret. It doesn't matter what the letter is. You can even add a sharp to a sharp. So if you had F sharp and you wanted to add a sharp to it, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you could. The only rule is you can't add a flat to a sharp, and that's because it would just reset it. If you had F sharp and you added a flat to it, it would just make it F. And I don't even know how you'd say that, F sharp flat. I guess that's like the flying car thing. I don't really know how to do it. What you normally would do is if you had F sharp and you wanted to return it back to F, you would use this symbol, the natural symbol. So with the basic numbers that we have here, had we lived at Pythagoras' era, that there's 7 letters, and we could count the intervals to the 7th of every one of these letters. So if I was going to play an interval of a second, it would be 2 letters. So if I started on A, it'd be the letters A and B. If I started on B, it'd be B and C. If I started on F, it would be F and G. The reason why the interval is called the second is because it has 2 letters involved in spelling it. If I had an interval that was called a third, that I could have, I could start on A, it would have 3 letters in it, A, B, C. If I started on E, it'd be E, F, G. If I started on F, it's going to swing back around. It's going to be F, G, and A. That's going to be the third starting on F. Now remember, if you lived during Pythagoras' time, you didn't have any sharps or flats. You only had these letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So it was simple enough. Every song was in the key of these letters, which we call the key of C now. I don't know what they called it during the Greek era, or A minor. And they weren't concerned that some intervals of a third had more frets in them than other ones. So this is what happened. Remember the story about people being stoned for playing the devil's interval? Well, I guess some people, they got tired of being stoned. And if you were to play an instrument, let's say like a cello or a violin, it doesn't have any frets, or a trombone, you slide your fingers up and down. And so they probably knew when they were playing B, and then they played the devil's interval, they probably realized they could just slide their finger up a little bit and make that into an interval that wouldn't involve them being stoned in front of everyone in the town. And so that was probably pretty desirable. So at that time, hopefully if you watched my videos before, you'll know that I try to give really good in-depth conversation. They can be pretty long. I love that because a lot of times when I'm teaching lessons, I have to be really like hammering it out. You know, lesson might be 30 minutes long or an hour. We have a lot of material we need to cover. But in here, I just do my best to kind of explain stuff. I don't have any script. I'm just speaking from experience. I've talked about this, I mean, thousands and thousands of times. I've taught classes. I've, like university classes. I've taught workshops. I've taught individual people in private lessons. I've taught this material a lot. So, but hopefully I try and make it fun and explain it well. So this is what we're going to do, is that the notes that were the devil's interval, it was B and F. So people that didn't want to be stoned, they moved the F up and they created a perfect fifth. And at that time, they added a sharp symbol next to it. So this would have been during the Renaissance era. And during the Renaissance era, there was only one letter that had a sharp symbol, and it was this one. It was only F. They only had modified, at that time, the one that would involve getting stoned to death for playing it. So that was pretty smart. So they modified only the F, and they did that with the sharp symbol. But at that time, they needed to have a better way of explaining themselves. And so this is what they did. They invented this word, perfect. And so they called the fifth that was 7.5 steps a perfect fifth. So now, if you're going to count your intervals, now all of a sudden, and I have this chart, I have this on my Patreon, or if you come in and take lessons, I'll just give it to you. Or if you take virtual lessons. If you want to take virtual lessons, we can do that. I think I have one opening in my schedule. So in case you don't know, if you do want to take virtual lessons, go to my website. It should be listed. It's larsonmusicstudio.com. That here I have all of the names of the intervals, and then over here I have the distances, the half steps. Now, this is where it gets really confusing, because that, you remember whenever I was saying that they started with the intervals at 900 BC? Well, in order to get the right answer, there's an actual order of operations that calculate the intervals. And so this is the order of operations. Step 1, you have to count the letters in the interval. Just like you lived during Pythagoras' time, you count the number of letters. Step 2, you count the number of half steps. So if you remember, we were looking at the B. So if I start on B and I count 5 letters, 1, 2, I end up on F. So if I play B and F, what do I get? Diablo in Musica. I get stoned in the center of the Greek town. I don't want that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to raise this 1 half step. And so this is B to F sharp. So now, how many letters are there in B to F sharp? Well, B to F sharp is still 5 letters. B, C, D, E, F. So it doesn't matter whether you do B to F or B to F sharp, it's still 5 letters. But what they did, was they started calling, and I have this on my chart, they started calling the interval that's 7 half steps, they called that one the perfect interval. And it's perfect because you won't be stoned in the center of the Greek town. The one that's 6 half steps that we call the Diablo Musica, that was the one that they called the diminished fifth. So it wasn't long, though, during the Renaissance era, when people started to experiment quite a bit with adding sharps and flats to other notes. It actually wasn't until close to the end of the Renaissance era, but they did. They started adding sharps and flats to other notes, and then all of a sudden, you had a whole new problem. So let's say, I got to find my letters here. So now, this is what we have. So here's what I have. I'm going to play a G chord, or I'm going to play a G interval, and it's going to be a third. So I can do G, A, B, 3 letters. So I can play this, G, A, B. Sounds like this. Or I can play G, A, B flat. So this is G, A, B flat. How many letters is it? Well, it's still 3. G, A, B flat is 3 letters. But guess what? The flat means I have to lower this note 1 letter, so we get this sound. That's the G, B flat. This is the G, B. Now, if I do this on a single string, here's G, B flat. Here's G, B. You'll notice that the G, B is a bigger stretch. And so, if we had lived during the Renaissance era, it was much more common. They would use the words major and minor in a way that's similar to how we use the words big and small. If you think about Asia major, Asia minor, there's other references like that. But so now you have G to B, the big one, and you have G to B flat, the smaller one. So they would call the G to B flat a minor third, and they would call the G to B a major third. And the way that they applied the rules is that the major and minor words can be applied to the intervals of 2, which we call second, 3, which we call third, 6, which is a sixth, and 7, which is a seventh. So any of those can be major or minor. You can have a major or minor second, so it's small or big. You can have a major or minor third, small or big. Major or minor sixth, small or big. Major or minor seventh, small or big. That the intervals that are left that I didn't name, they're the 4th and the 5th. And of course the root. So the root is the letter we start on, and we're going to just for now say that that's how it stays. It stays at the root. But the 5th, you can have the 5th that you don't get stoned, 7 half steps. So if I start on G, and I count 7 half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it would be here. So it's this. This one, since you're not getting stoned, they call that the perfect, when I say stoned, I'm talking about people throwing rocks at you. That they call this the perfect 5th. So there's 5 letters, G to D, G, A, B, C, D, and it's 7 half steps. And so I have my chart over here, and this is the part where people get really confused. Because over here, you'll notice it says diminished fifth, perfect fifth, augmented fifth. Well, what does that mean? That means there's 5 letters in spelling that interval. Do you remember the first thing I said? You count the letters. That's the number one thing you do. You count the letters. So you have to have 5 letters to spell that interval. The next thing you do is you count the half steps. If you have 5 letters, and 5 letters will always be G to D. So if you're starting on G, D will always be 5 letters away. So if you start on G and you play this note, that's the devil's interval. That's the music in Diablo. That is 6 half steps. So if I start on 3 and I count 6 half steps, that's 9. Those are the same notes. Can you hear that? 5 letters. So it's a fifth. And then 6 half steps. Yeah, I have my chart. You have to have your chart until you get really familiar with it. The perfect fifth, that's the one where you don't get stoned in the center of town. That one's 7 half steps. That one's the power chord. So it's 3 plus 7 half steps. That's 10. And then there's a really unusual one. It's called an augmented fifth. It was not added. It was added later in the Baroque era. J.S. Bach. I don't know if you ever listened to Johann Sebastian Bach, but it's so crazy because his music was so advanced, and he contributed so much, such genius, that it's hard to imagine that whenever you listen to it now in 2026, that whenever he started writing music, they didn't have any sharps or flats. And his contribution by the end, it was like a mastery of changing keys and incorporating all the different sharps and flats. He even changed the tuning of the piano. So we'll talk about that later. I know my videos are always so long, but I don't want to go off on too many tangents. But this is the beginning of how to count intervals. You count the letters. Then you have to count the half steps. When you first start, you have to have a chart. It's like a reference chart. And I always say it's like using a tape measure. If you work in a trade where you have to measure things and it's important, you see a carpenter, they have their tape measure clipped onto the little tab on their carpenter pants where the tape measure goes. That's because that's a very important tool. They aren't just guessing at how long the measurements need to be. They're not guessing at the measurements. They're measuring them and getting them right. So now if you think about what I was saying with the major third and the minor third, I was explaining this to someone yesterday. Where we live, where I'm teaching today in northern Kentucky, there's a big park a few miles away. It's called DeVue Park. And I was saying if we went running, if we left my office here and we ran to DeVue Park, it's pretty big. So if we ran to the side that's closest to us, it would be a much shorter distance than if we ran to the side that was furthest away from us. Maybe you could think about that. I know I've been to the Grand Canyon and I thought it was super cool. I hope I get to go back. And we drove from Las Vegas and we went to the West Rim. There's I think it's the South Rim is the side that's where the most popular tourists go. I have not been to that part yet. But it's a much, much longer drive from Las Vegas to do that. And so we went to the side that was closest to us. So if we were talking about the interval names like people used during the Renaissance era, we did the minor drive instead of the major drive. When I was talking about running and we're going to run to the closest side of the park and not the furthest side, we would do the minor run and not the major run. So whenever you hear these intervals that say minor third and major third, that's what they're saying. They're saying that the interval has 3 letters in it and that you can add sharps or flats to make it shorter or longer, and that's what they're referencing. A big part of the reason it's so confusing is that they use those same words for scales. And I used to think that a minor scale had minor intervals and a major scale had major intervals. And that actually is not a true statement. That a minor scale can have major and minor intervals, and same thing is true. Let's see, a major scale doesn't, I don't think it has any minor intervals, but it's purely coincidental. It's just it would be like if you looked at 3 decks, and in all 3 decks, this is a deck on a house, if they all were built with 10-foot decking boards, and then you made the assumption that all decks were 10 feet wide, that would not be a true assumption. But based on looking at 3 decks, you might think that that is true. So the major scale and the minor scale, just like the words that I was talking about, major and minor, they were named actually for a different reason, because music theorists that were analyzing music during the Baroque era, what they discovered was that of all the various scales that you can use, there's seven modes, only 2 of them were really used a lot, and one of them was used more frequently than all the other ones. The one that was used is called the Ionian mode. That's what the Greeks call it, but we call it the major scale. And the reason why we call it the major scale is because it was used a lot. That's the reason why. And so the minor scale was the second most commonly used, but it wasn't used as much. The minor scale is the Aeolian mode, and it was not used as much as the major scale. So we called that one, I was not a part of it, but it would have been musicologists or music theorists that lived during the mid-Baroque era. They were naming all this stuff, and they said, hey, these scales, we just see 2 of the 7 possible modes, we see 2 of them all the time. I want to be clear that I know I am not being 100% thorough, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to introduce the concepts to help you have a better understanding as far as what's happening with the music, and that these concepts, they can be pretty complex and a little slippery, and so I'm just trying to help get you going, because one of the things that I want to talk about in some of these future videos is that there's so frequently we talk about scales and how scale functions. Sometimes we talk about arpeggios, but if you know some of the names of the intervals, you can solve the problem. And what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to be able to make more videos for my YouTube channel where I can explain the solution using the interval. And I'll give you an example. This is a very long video, but I'll give you an example. So I'm going to play A. That's an A chord. And then I'm going to play the A note. So if you listen to much blues, one of the really common blues licks that you hear, it's very cool, that what happens is here's the A, and the A is the very important note. So what they do is the blues players, they'll start on G, and G is the 7th of A. If we count A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 7 letters to get to G. So if I play A and I go to this G, now I'm going down. So here's my A. If I'm like, I go to the G and I'm gonna bend it to A. That's just like if I went G, A, G, A, G. But without the bend, it doesn't have that cool bluesy sound. That here, what am I doing? I'm starting on 4. So I'm in the key of A. That note's C. That note's not C. That note's D. I go A, B, C, D. That's the 4th. I go D. I bend it to E. E, A. That, if you'll notice, so many of licks in jazz and in blues, rock, and all styles of music, that it's not a mystery what's happening. A lot of times, if the chord is A is the most important note. That just like I was saying with the comedian, you don't want to just come out and say the punchline. You sort of want to introduce the idea, set it up, and then say the punchline. So here, if I'm like, I'm going to play this. You notice what I did is I started, I didn't just jump right to the A, and then I don't have a click track or a back track going on, but one of the things we do to make the A sound really important is we'll have the A land on a very important rhythmic note, maybe beat 1 or beat 3, but beat 1 is very important. So. All right. I hope everybody's liking the videos. I really want to knock out some of these music theory videos, help people get the vocabulary, have a better understanding so we can really make some forward progress on solving these problems. That a lot of times, if you know a little bit, like what I was just describing, here's A, you find G, you bend it to A, that it's called a unison bend. That you don't have to memorize a lot of scale patterns or really any patterns at all. If you know A is the most important note, then you can find the other notes that are working with A, and you can learn how to play really cool licks. So like and subscribe my videos. I've been getting lots of subscribers. I'm so excited that when I first started, about a month ago, as I think is when I first started, but my hope was to get 200 subscribers. So I checked the other day and I have more than 200, which is pretty cool. I've been teaching lessons for a long time. I teach a lot of different styles. I've lectured, done master classes. I have a lot of varied experiences. If there's something that you want to see me do a video about, you can post on the comments of my YouTube. You can send me a message through my website. If you want to take lessons, you can message me through my website. Somebody actually sent me a message this morning and they wanted me to break down the Albert King box and the BB King box, and I'm planning on doing that. I have some variety of lessons coming up. Last night I posted a video about overcoming hand pain and elbow pain when playing, some strategies that I've used, things that I've done that have helped me a lot, and retrained my playing a little bit. So all right, long video, sorry about that, or maybe not, I don't know. Hopefully everybody's enjoying it. So I know I'm having a lot of fun making these videos, and so like and subscribe, please. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.